My daughter gave the $35,000 car I bought for her college to her wealthy stepmom, then told me, she's a better mom. I didn't argue. I just waited until she came begging me to cater her sorority's biggest gala. At the end of the perfect party, I handed her the invoice for the catering, with an extra line item for one $35,000 car, and told her to have her better mom pay the bill. Before I begin, I just want to say, thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. Now let me tell you my story. My name is Brenda Garrett, and for most of my 52 years, my love has been an action verb. It's in the 16-hour days I spent turning a small home-based meal service into one of the most sought-after catering companies in Charlotte. It's in the calluses on my hands, the permanent ache in my lower back, the quiet satisfaction of a perfectly executed event. My love is in the work. And for the past 19 years, all of that work, all of that love, has been focused on a single, brilliant, and increasingly distant star, my daughter, Chloe. The day she left for her freshman year at UNC Chapel Hill was the proudest and most painful day of my life. I stood on the manicured lawn of her new dormitory, a world of old brick and ivy so different from the community college I'd attended at night, and I felt the tectonic plates of my own life shift. She was moving on, up, and away. My final act of service, the culmination of a lifetime of sacrifice, was parked at the curb. It was a brand new Honda CR-V, a sleek, pearl-white SUV that smelled of new beginnings. It had cost me $35,000, a sum that was not insignificant, even for me. It was a tangible piece of my life's work, a rolling, steel and glass manifestation of late nights, early mornings, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. It was safe. It was reliable. It was everything a mother wants for her child when she can no longer be there to protect her. Oh my God, Mom, I can't believe it. Chloe had breathed, her hands flying to her mouth. She was, in that moment, my little girl again, her eyes wide with a genuine, uncomplicated joy. "It's for you, baby," I said, my own voice thick with emotion. I handed her the keys. "So you can come home on weekends, so you can be safe." We had, of course, discussed the practicalities. As a business owner, I knew the value of a clear agreement. The title and registration would remain in my name for the first year. It was a simple matter of insurance. It was vastly cheaper to keep the car on my company's policy. But it was also a matter of principle. "This is a tool, not a toy, Chloe," I had told her. "After your freshman year, when you've shown you can be responsible with it, we'll sign the title over to you. Until then, it's my car, but it's your privilege." She had agreed, of course, with the easy, dismissive wave of a teenager who is not really listening. She was too dazzled by the shine of the paint, by the promise of freedom the car represented. As I drove away from Chapel Hill that day, leaving her standing proudly by her new car, I felt a deep and deeply satisfying sense of accomplishment. I had done it. I, Brenda Garrett, a single mother who had built a business with her own two hands, had successfully launched my daughter into a world of opportunity I had only ever dreamed of. I had given her a foundation. I had given her a future. I had no idea that she would take my sacrifice, this $35,000 symbol of my love, and offer it up as a tribute on the altar of another woman. The phone calls from Chapel Hill started as a trickle and soon became a flood. But they were not the calls I had hoped for, the ones filled with stories of interesting classes or new friends. They were almost exclusively reports from a foreign and glittering world I was not a part of, the world of her father and his new wife, Isabel. My ex-husband, Robert, a man whose ambition had always outstripped his loyalty, had left me 10 years ago for Isabel, a woman who had never worked a day in her life, and who wore her inherited wealth like a suit of armor. They lived in a lavish, modern mansion in Myers Park, a world of charity galas, European vacations, and a quiet, effortless luxury that was the polar opposite of my own life of grit and hustle. Chloe, it seemed, had become a regular weekend commuter, not to my comfortable home in Dilworth, but to the marble and glass palace in Myers Park, and she had become a devout worshipper at the temple of Isabel. "You will not believe the dress Isabel wore to the Mint Museum gala, Mom," She would gush over the phone, her voice a breathless torrent of designer names I had never heard of. It was a custom Oscar de la Renta. She knows him personally, you know. The conversations were a relentless monologue of praise for Isabel. Isabel says the only place to summer is the Hamptons. Isabel has the most amazing personal shopper at Neiman Marcus. Isabel thinks my major in art history is a perfect foundation for a life of cultured leisure. Each sentence was a small, sharp paper cut on my heart. She was not just admiring her stepmother's lifestyle, she was implicitly, and sometimes explicitly, denigrating mine. Isabel was just saying how important it is for a woman to cultivate her own, personal brand, she told me once, her voice taking on the tone of a disciple quoting scripture. She said that a career is fine, but a life is what really matters. You know, a life of taste and travel and influence. I, the woman who had built a brand from the ground up, who had a sterling reputation in my field, who had influenced the palates of thousands of people, said nothing. My brand, my career, my life of hard work, it was all being subtly and cruelly dismissed as something less than, something to be pitied. The worst part was the way she began to parrot Isabel's condescending opinions about me. I was telling Isabel about your new catering contract with the hospital, she said one evening. And she was so impressed that you're still so busy. She said she could never imagine working that hard. She says her work is managing the house and her social obligations. I could hear Isabel's voice, her silken, manipulative purr, behind every word my daughter spoke. She was being brainwashed, seduced by a lifestyle that seemed to be all shine and no effort. She was a moth, fluttering closer and closer to a flame that I knew, with a mother's instinct, was going to burn her. I tried, gently, to warn her, to offer a different perspective. "Chloe, honey," I said once, after a particularly long and fawning monologue about Isabel's new tennis bracelet. "Your stepmother's life is very different from ours. We're working people. We build things. There's a different kind of value in that. All way." "I know, Mom," she'd replied, her voice laced with a weary, pitying sigh. "But Isabel says that the most valuable thing a person can build is a beautiful life." She did not understand that my work, my sacrifice, was the very thing that was allowing her the freedom to even contemplate such a shallow philosophy. She was so dazzled by the destination that she had developed a profound and total contempt for the journey, and for the woman who had paved the road for her. The indoctrination of Chloe was not a passive process. It was an active, strategic campaign, orchestrated with a quiet, smiling, and deeply sinister precision by Isabel herself. A weekend visit to the Myers Park mansion was a masterclass in subtle manipulation. Chloe sat on a plush, white sofa in Isabel's cavernous, sun-drenched living room, a space that looked less like a home and more like a high-end furniture showroom. Isabel, looking effortlessly chic in a cashmere lounge set, glided into the room, holding 2 flutes of champagne. "For us, darling," she said, handing a glass to Chloe, who at 19, was still 2 years underage. "A little celebration of your first month of freedom." Chloe took the glass, her eyes shining. Being here, being treated as an equal, a confidant, by this glamorous, powerful woman, was an intoxicating drug. "I am so proud of you, Chloe," Isabel said, settling into the sofa opposite her. "You are navigating a very difficult transition with such grace." "What do you mean?" Chloe asked. Isabel sighed, a small, theatrical sound of deep, worldly sympathy. "Well, your mother, of course," she said, her voice a low, conspiratorial purr. "She's a wonderful woman. So strong. So driven. But her world is very different from the one you are destined for. And I worry that she doesn't see that. I worry that she is trying to hold you back." The seed of poison was planted, wrapped in the language of concern. "What do you mean, hold me back?" Chloe asked, her brow furrowed. "Well, all this talk of responsibility, of work," Isabel said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "It's the language of a different generation, a different class. Your mother had to fight for everything. And that is to be admired. But you, darling, you are different. You are meant for a life of beauty, of influence. You shouldn't have to struggle. Your job is to cultivate your own, exquisite taste." She then deployed her most effective weapon, the comparison. Look at your mother's life, she said, her voice full of a pitying sadness. It's all work. All sacrifice. She has never been to Paris. She has never been to a proper spa. She doesn't understand the art of living. She only understands the art of working. And she is trying to impose that same dreary sentence on you. She leaned forward, her eyes locking with Chloe's. I, on the other hand, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I see your potential. I see the brilliant, sophisticated woman you are becoming. And I want to help you achieve that. I want to be your mentor. Your guide. The manipulation was brilliant. She was framing Brenda's love, her sacrifice, her practical, working-class values, as a cage. And she was framing her own life of idle, inherited luxury as a form of enlightened, female empowerment. She was not just offering Chloe a different lifestyle. She was offering her a superior identity. That car, for example, Isabel continued, gesturing vaguely towards the driveway. It's a lovely, practical car. A very, Brenda, sort of car. But it's not you. Is it, darling? You are a Porsche girl. A Mercedes girl. Not a sensible, suburban SUV girl. Chloe, who had been so thrilled with the car just a month ago, now looked at it with new, critical eyes. It was a Brenda car. It was a symbol of the very world Isabel was teaching her to disdain. The seed had been planted. The idea had been formed. And Chloe, in her desperate, pathetic desire to shed the skin of her mother's world and slip into the silken robes of her stepmother's, was about to make a gesture so grand, so foolish, and so profoundly, unforgivably cruel, that it would change the course of all their lives. The betrayal, when it came, was not a quiet, secret thing. It was a public performance, a grand, theatrical gesture, designed for an audience of one, Isabel. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, at the end of Chloe's weekend visit. She had spent 2 days, immersed in the intoxicating world of Myers Park, a world of brunch at the country club, of casual, expensive shopping trips, of long, conspiratorial conversations with Isabel. She was completely, hopelessly, under her spell. Brenda, her mother, had become a distant, slightly embarrassing figure in her mind, a representative of a life she was rapidly, and eagerly, outgrowing. The Honda CR-V, which had once been a symbol of freedom and maternal love, now felt like a chain, a constant, physical reminder of her connection to that other, lesser world. As she was preparing to leave, to drive back to the reality of her dorm room and her studies, an idea, a terrible and brilliant idea that had been germinating in her mind all weekend, finally blossomed. It was a way to prove her loyalty, a way to definitively and irrevocably declare her allegiance to Isabel's world, a way to finally, truly, belong. She found Isabel on the back patio, a sprawling, slate-tiled space that overlooked a swimming pool the size of a small lake. Isabel was lounging on a chaise, reading a fashion magazine, the very picture of idle, luxurious grace. Chloe walked up to her, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and a thrilling, exhilarating sense of her own audacity. She was holding the keys to the CR-V. Isabel, she began, her voice a little breathless. I have something for you. Isabel looked up from her magazine, a look of mild, amused curiosity in her eyes. Chloe held out the keys. I want you to have this, she said, the words a rush. The car. I want to give it to you. Isabel sat up, a slow, theatrical smile spreading across her face. She did not look surprised. She looked pleased, as if this were a development she had been anticipating. Darling, she said, her voice a purr of feigned astonishment. What are you talking about? You can't give me your car. Yes, I can, Chloe insisted, her voice gaining strength. I want to. You would appreciate it so much more than I do. It's a good, solid car. It's perfect for you to run your errands in. And honestly, it's just not me. She was parroting the lines Isabel herself had fed her. The gesture was so much more than just a gift. It was a repudiation. It was a rejection of her mother's taste, of her mother's values, of her mother's sacrifice. It was a daughter taking her own mother's love and regifting it to a more desirable, more socially advantageous replacement. Isabel's smile was a thing of pure, triumphant victory. She had won. She had completely and totally conquered this girl's heart and mind. "Well, Chloe," she said, her voice dripping with a false, magnanimous grace. "If you insist, it is an incredibly generous gesture. I am truly touched." She took the keys from Chloe's outstretched hand. The transaction was complete. Chloe felt a surge of pure, unadulterated euphoria. She had done it. She had made the ultimate sacrifice on the altar of her new life. She had shed the last, most significant symbol of her old one. She felt sophisticated and powerful, and, for the first time in her life, truly worthy of the world she so desperately wanted to inhabit. She did not, for a single moment, consider the woman who had worked for years to pay for that car. She did not consider the love, the sacrifice, the hope that was contained within its steel frame. She saw only the approval in her stepmother's eyes. And in that moment, it was the only thing in the world that mattered. The news of the betrayal did not come from Chloe. It came, as so many of life's unpleasant surprises do, from a stranger in a cubicle 100 miles away. It came from my insurance company. It was a Tuesday morning. I was in my office, a small, cluttered space at the back of my catering kitchen, going over the logistics for a large corporate event. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, is this Brenda Garrett?" A cheerful, professional voice asked. "This is she," I replied. "Ma'am, my name is Susan, and I'm calling from Allstate Insurance. I'm just doing a routine follow-up on a policy change request for the 2023 Honda CR-V on your account." My heart gave a small, confused flutter. A policy change? I haven't requested any changes. "Oh," the woman said, a note of confusion in her own voice. "Well, we received a request this morning to add a new primary driver to the policy for that vehicle. An Isabel Blackwell?" She was clearly reading from a screen. "And to change the garaging address to a residence in Myers Park." The world seemed to go very, very quiet. The sounds of my busy kitchen, the clatter of pans, the shouting of my chefs faded into a dull, distant roar. I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. "Isabel, Myers Park." "Ma'am?" The voice on the phone said. "Are you still there?" "Yes," I managed to say, my own voice a strange, strangled thing. "Yes, I'm here. There must be some mistake. Please do not make any changes to the policy. I will look into it and call you back." I hung up the phone. I sat at my desk, my hands clasped in front of me to keep them from shaking. I stared at the wall, at the framed menus, and the photos of my smiling staff. I tried to make sense of the information. A new primary driver. Isabel. My first thought, my most generous, motherly thought, was that there had been some kind of accident. That Chloe had gotten into a fender bender, and that Isabel was simply helping her deal with the insurance. It was a desperate, hopeful attempt to find a rational, innocent explanation for something that felt, in my gut, deeply, deeply wrong. I took a deep breath, my heart hammering against my ribs, and I called my daughter. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright, cheerful, and completely, unnervingly normal. "Hey, Mom. What's up?" "Chloe," I began, trying to keep my own voice even. "I just got a strange call from the insurance company. About the car. They said someone requested to add Isabel as a driver." There was a pause on the other end of the line. A small but deeply telling silence. "Oh," she said, her voice losing some of its breezy cheer. "Right. About that." "About what, Chloe?" I asked, a cold, hard knot of dread forming in the pit of my stomach. "What's going on?" "Look, Mom, it's not a big deal," she said, her voice now taking on a defensive, dismissive edge. "Isabel needed a car to run her errands, and I'm barely using it at school, so I'm just letting her borrow it for a while." The lie was so flimsy, so transparent, it was almost insulting. You don't add someone as a primary driver to a policy for a car you are just borrowing. "Chloe," I said, my voice now losing its calm. "That doesn't make any sense. Isabel and Robert have 4 cars. Why would she need to borrow yours?" "I don't know, Mom," she snapped, her voice rising. She just does. She likes it. It's a good car. Ah, it is a good car, Chloe, I said, my own voice rising to match hers. It's a $35,000 car that I worked my ass off to buy for you. For your safety. Not for Isabel to run her errands in. The dam of her defensiveness finally broke, and the ugly, resentful truth came flooding out. Oh my God, why are you being so dramatic about this? She shouted. It's just a car. And frankly, I have a right to do what I want with it. No, Chloe, you do not. I shot back. It is not your car. The title is in my name. It is my car that I am allowing you the privilege of using. And then she said it. The final, devastating, and unforgivable thing. Well, maybe I don't want your car. She screamed, her voice a raw, ugly sound of pure, unadulterated teenage rebellion from a 19-year-old woman. Maybe I don't want anything from you. The line went dead. She had hung up on me. I sat in my office, the silent phone in my hand, and the ugly, terrible truth of the situation finally, completely, and irrevocably landed. She had not just lent Isabel the car. She had given it to her. She had taken my sacrifice, my love, my $35,000, and she had handed it over to another woman. And she was not sorry. She was defiant. The silence that followed her hanging up was more violent than any shouting match. I sat in my office, the sounds of my thriving business a dull, meaningless roar in the background. My mind was a maelstrom of disbelief, of hurt, of a rage so profound it felt like it was going to split me in two. I tried to call her back. Once. Twice. The calls went straight to voicemail, a clear, digital signal that I had been blocked. She was not just angry, she was refusing to even engage. She had delivered her blow, and now she was retreating into a fortress of childish, petulant silence. I spent the rest of the day in a fog. I moved through the motions of my work. I approved menus, I spoke to clients, but I was not really there. I was trapped in the echo of that brutal, final conversation. Maybe I don't want anything from you. That evening, I sat in my quiet, empty house, a glass of wine untouched on the table beside me, and I tried to make sense of it. I tried to find the loving, sweet-natured daughter I had raised inside the angry, resentful stranger who had screamed at me over the phone. I tried to tell myself that this was just a phase, a temporary, collegiate rebellion, a misguided attempt at asserting her own independence. But I knew in my gut that it was more than that. This was the culmination of years of Isabel's subtle, poisonous influence. This was a declaration of allegiance. Chloe had chosen a side, and it was not mine. My phone buzzed on the table. A text message. It was from Chloe. My heart leaped with a foolish, maternal hope. An apology? A retraction? I opened the message. It was a long, single block of text, a manifesto of her own perceived victimhood and my failures. I'm not going to talk to you when you're being hysterical. It began. You are being completely unreasonable about this. It's a car. It's a thing. Isabel actually appreciates it. She understands what a generous gift is. You just use things to control me. The projection, the twisting of reality, was breathtaking. I, who had given her everything, was controlling. Isabel, who had manipulated her into giving away her mother's gift, was appreciative. The text continued, each sentence a new, sharp, and deeply personal wound. I'm sorry, but my life is different now. I am in a world that you don't understand. A world of grace, and taste, and a different set of values. I need people in my life who support that, who understand that. And Isabel understands that. She gives me advice that is actually helpful. She is teaching me how to be the kind of woman I want to be. And then came the final, killing blow. The words that would sever the last, lingering thread of my hope. The words that would change everything. She just gets me. She's more supportive and gives me better advice. She's a better mom. She's a better mom. I read the words once. Twice. A third time. I felt the world go still. The air in my lungs seemed to turn to ice. It was a sentence of such profound and calculated cruelty that it was almost a work of art. It was the emotional equivalent of a nuclear bomb, a statement designed to inflict the maximum possible damage, to burn the entire landscape of our relationship to the ground. And in the white-hot flash of that explosion, my own heart, the soft, forgiving, endlessly hopeful heart of a mother, was instantly cauterized. The pain was so immense, so absolute, that it transformed, in an instant, into something else. Something cold, something hard, something utterly, completely, and permanently resolute. The time for grief was over. The time for hurt was over. The time for trying to understand my daughter's choices was over. She had made her choice. She had chosen her better mom. And I, in that moment, made a choice of my own. I would not fight for the title of best mom. I would not engage in this pathetic, rigged competition. I would simply, quietly, and with a new, terrifying clarity, show her the true, and very high, cost of her choice. My response to her devastating text message was not immediate. I did not fire back a volley of angry, wounded words. I did not plead. I did not argue. I simply sat in the quiet of my living room and let her words, in all their monstrous finality, settle over me. She's a better mom. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my armchair, the house dark around me, and I performed a kind of emotional and strategic triage. The mother in me was a casualty, a catastrophic wound that would likely never fully heal. But the businesswoman, the tough, pragmatic, and deeply resilient woman who had built an empire from scratch, she was very much alive. And she was now in charge. By the time the sun rose, casting a pale, gray light into my living room, my plan was formed. It was a plan of quiet, cold, and devastating logic. It was a plan that would not engage with her emotional warfare, but would instead respond with a series of simple, irrefutable, and deeply consequential business decisions. My first act was a quiet confirmation of her own choice. She had declared that she had a new, better mother. I would simply, legally and officially, honor that declaration. That morning, I did not go to my catering kitchen. I went to the Department of Motor Vehicles. I took a number and I waited, a calm, anonymous figure in a sea of bureaucratic impatience. When my number was called, I walked to the counter. "Good morning," I said to the clerk. "I am here to transfer the title of a vehicle." I had the paperwork with me. The original title to the 2023 Honda CR-V, which was, as Chloe had so conveniently forgotten, solely in my name. I had a signed, notarized form authorizing the transfer of ownership. In the space for the new owner, I had neatly, and with a hand that did not tremble, written the name, Isabel Blackwell. The clerk processed the paperwork with a bored, bureaucratic efficiency. There was a small fee. I paid it in cash. She stamped the forms, and it was done. The $35,000 asset, the symbol of my sacrifice, was now, legally and irrevocably, the property of my daughter's stepmother. I had not just accepted Chloe's gift to Isabel. I had legally sanctioned it. I had finalized the transaction. I had, in essence, sent a receipt. My second act was to call my sister Denise. Denise is a successful real estate broker, a woman whose tongue is as sharp as her business acumen. She had been a furious, helpless witness to Chloe's slow, toxic indoctrination by Isabel. I called her from the parking lot of the DMV. I told her everything. The phone call, the text message, the final cruel words. And then I told her what I had just done. There was a long, appreciative silence on the other end of the line. "Oh, Brenda," she finally said, her voice a low, dangerous purr of pure, unadulterated admiration. "That is the most beautifully, viciously elegant thing I have ever heard in my life. You didn't just let her give the car away. You gift-wrapped it for her. So what's the next move, General?" "The next move," I said, my voice as calm and steady as a surgeon's hand, "is to send the bill." We then spent the next hour on the phone, formulating the rest of the plan. A plan of quiet, systematic, and complete financial disentanglement. A plan that would force my daughter to finally, for the first time in her privileged, cosseted life, experience the full, unmitigated consequences of her own choices. She had chosen her better mom. Now, she would get to experience her better mom's financial plan. The execution of the second part of my plan was as quiet and as simple as a single text message. After finalizing the strategy with Denise, I took a deep breath and composed the message to Chloe. It was not emotional. It was not angry. It was a simple, factual statement of a new reality. I typed the words with a calm, steady thumb. Chloe, I have received your text and I understand your position. I have honored your wishes and have officially transferred the title of the Honda CR-V to Isabel. It is now legally her property. I hope she enjoys it. I paused, letting the first part of the message stand alone, a quiet confirmation of her own actions. Then, I typed the second, and far more consequential, part. Since you have made it clear that you have chosen your better mom, I will, of course, honor that decision in all respects. You have also chosen her financial plan. As of today, your university meal plan and your monthly spending allowance have been cancelled. All future financial matters regarding your education and your lifestyle should be directed to her and your father. I wish you the very best. I read the message once, twice. It was perfect. It was cold, it was professional, and it was utterly, completely, unanswerable. I pressed send. The blue bubble appeared on my screen, a silent confirmation that the missile had been launched. The consequences, for Chloe, were immediate and catastrophic. She was a 19-year-old girl, 100 miles from home, who had just been, without warning, financially excommunicated. The meal card she used to eat in the university dining hall was declined that very evening. The debit card I funded, the one she used for books, for clothes, for late-night pizza with her friends, was now a useless piece of plastic. Her first reaction, I am sure, was one of pure, sputtering, entitled rage. She would have seen my message not as a logical consequence of her own actions, but as a vindictive, punitive act of a scorned mother. She would have, in her arrogance, immediately turned to her better mom and her father, expecting them to swoop in and seamlessly replace my financial support with their own, presumably superior, version. And this is where she received her first brutal lesson in the difference between my love and Isabel's support. Robert and Isabel were not ungenerous. They were, however, transactional. Their support came with strings, with lectures, with a constant, low-grade hum of judgment and expectation. They did not simply give her money. They gave her a meager allowance, a fraction of what I had been providing, and it came with a long, condescending lecture from Robert about fiscal responsibility and a series of passive-aggressive comments from Isabel about the unfortunate necessity of it all. They did not understand the true, day-to-day costs of a modern college student's life. They saw her requests for money for books, for sorority dues, for a new laptop when her old one died, not as necessities, but as a series of annoying, middle-class problems that were beneath their notice. Chloe's life at UNC, which had been a seamless, comfortable glide, became a frantic, humiliating scramble. She was the girl whose card was declined at the campus bookstore. She was the girl who couldn't afford to go on the spring break trip to Cancun with her new, wealthy sorority sisters. She was the girl who had to make awkward excuses about why she couldn't go out to dinner. Her new, glittering social life, the one she had been so desperate to impress, began to crumble. The fair-weather friends she had made, the ones who were impressed by her car and her clothes, began to drift away. She was no longer an asset in their social world. She was a liability. She was, for the first time in her life, experiencing the cold, hard reality of a budget. And she was learning that the support of her better mom was a conditional, and very stingy, thing. The foundation of her life, which she had always taken for granted, had been kicked away. And she was in a free fall. The months that followed were a quiet, brutal education for Chloe. Her life, once a seamless performance of effortless, collegiate cool, became a daily struggle. She had to get a part-time job, a humiliating stint working in the university library, shelving books for minimum wage. The shame of it, for a girl who had been so recently lecturing her own mother on the importance of a beautiful life, was acute. Her relationship with her father and Isabel became strained. Her calls to them were no longer filled with fawning praise, but with desperate, resentful requests for money, requests that were usually met with a lecture or a condescending sigh. The beautiful, supportive fantasy of her better mom was being revealed as a hollow transactional reality. Isabel was a wonderful mentor when it came to choosing a handbag. She was far less interested when it came to paying a utility bill. The final, crushing blow to Chloe's social standing came in the spring. Her sorority, one of the most prestigious and expensive on campus, had an annual tradition: a high-profile, spring charity gala. It was the social event of the season, a chance for the well-heeled young women to showcase their connections, their style, and their fundraising prowess. The planning of the event was a competitive, high-stakes affair, and the honor of chairing the gala was bestowed upon the sorority sister who was deemed the most capable, the most connected. In a moment of profound, and deeply ironic, miscalculation, Chloe, in a desperate attempt to reclaim her lost social status, had promised her sisters that she could deliver an event unlike any they had ever seen. And she had promised them that she could secure the one, single element that would guarantee its success: the catering from the most exclusive, most celebrated, and most prestigious catering company in the state of North Carolina. My company. She had made this promise, of course, without ever having spoken to me. She had assumed, in a final, desperate act of childish magical thinking, that I would, of course, do it for her. That my maternal love, though spurned, was still a resource she could tap into when it suited her. The day she finally made the call was a day I had been anticipating for months. I was in my office, reviewing the proofs for a new menu, when my assistant buzzed me. "Brenda," she said, her voice hesitant. It's your daughter on the line." I took a deep breath. "Put her through," I said. Her voice, when it came, was not the arrogant, defiant shout I had last heard. It was a small, thin, and deeply humiliated thing. "Mom," she said, the word a question, not a statement. "Hello, Chloe," I replied, my own voice calm, professional, and utterly, completely, unreadable. She stumbled through a few awkward pleasantries, her voice cracking. And then, she got to the point. She told me about the gala, about the promise she had made. She framed it, of course, not as a desperate plea to save her own social skin, but as a chance for us to reconnect, to work on a project together. It was a pathetic, transparent performance, but I let her finish. I listened as she described the event, the high-profile guests, the importance of it all. When she was done, there was a long, pleading silence. "So," she finally whispered, her voice a thread of pure, unadulterated desperation. "Will you do it? Will you help me?" I let the silence stretch, a small, quiet act of cruelty that I felt she had more than earned. "I am a professional, Chloe," I finally said, my voice as cool and crisp as a new linen napkin. "My company is available for hire. If your sorority wishes to engage my services, they are welcome to submit a formal proposal. We can discuss the terms of the contract then." I had not said no, but I had not said yes. I had simply, and with a quiet, devastating finality, redefined our relationship. She was not my daughter, asking for a favor. She was a potential client, making a business inquiry. And the business I was about to show her had a very, very high price. Chloe, in her desperation, had no choice but to accept my terms. The idea of going back to her sorority sisters and admitting that her own mother would not cater her event for free was a public humiliation she could not bear. So, she played the part I had assigned her. She became a client. The next day, I received a formal, and very professionally written, email from the official account of the sorority's social committee, of which Chloe was the chair. The email was a masterpiece of corporate speak, a document I was sure Chloe had spent all night drafting. It formally requested a proposal for catering services for their spring charity gala. My response was equally professional. I had my own assistant reply, thanking them for their inquiry and attaching our standard new client questionnaire and a schedule of my consultation fees. The first, quiet turn of the screw was the consultation fee. It was a non-refundable, $500 charge, simply for the privilege of a 1-hour meeting with me to discuss the event. It was a standard fee for a new, high-profile client. It was also a sum I knew Chloe would have to scramble to produce. She paid it. The check, when it arrived, was from her father's account, a small, early sign of the financial bailout that was to come. The consultation itself was a masterclass in professional distance. I had Chloe come not to my home, but to my corporate office. I did not meet with her alone. I had my senior event manager, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Maria, sit in on the meeting. I treated Chloe with a cool, polite, and utterly impersonal professionalism. I called her Miss Garrett. I did not ask about her classes. I did not ask about her friends. I asked about her event's theme, her guest count, and her budget. She was visibly uncomfortable, squirming in her chair under my calm, dispassionate gaze. This was not the tearful, mother-daughter reunion she had been hoping for. This was a high-stakes business negotiation, and she was completely out of her depth. After the meeting, I had my team draw up a proposal. It was a work of art, a testament to the professionalism and creativity that had made my company a success. It detailed a breathtaking menu of past hors d'oeuvres, a multi-course seated dinner, a craft cocktail bar, and a dessert buffet that would have made Marie Antoinette weep. It was, without question, the proposal for the most spectacular event the UNC campus had ever seen. And at the bottom of the proposal was the price. A single, stark, and non-negotiable 5-figure sum. It was my standard rate for an event of this scale and complexity. It was also a fortune that I knew her sorority, and Chloe herself, did not possess. She called me the day she received it, her voice a panicked whisper. "Mom, this price, it's so high. Is there any way, a family discount?" "I'm sorry, Ms. Garrett," I replied, my voice cool and firm. "We do not offer discounts. The price is the price. The quality of our service speaks for itself." She was trapped. She had promised her sisters the moon, and I was the only person who could deliver it. To back out now would be to admit defeat, to reveal her own powerlessness. So, she did what I knew she would do. She signed the contract. The contract itself was another of my sister Denise's legal masterpieces. It was an ironclad, multi-page document that detailed every aspect of the agreement. It specified the payment schedule, 50% down, and the final 50% due upon the conclusion of the event. It included clauses for overtime, for damages, for any and all contingencies. And it included one, small, and very personal clause that I had asked Denise to add. It stated that the client, Ms. Chloe Garrett, as the chair of the social committee, was the sole, personal guarantor of the final payment. The sorority's name was on the contract, but the financial liability, the personal responsibility for the debt, was hers, and hers alone. She signed it without reading the fine print. She was so blinded by her desperation to secure my services, so certain that she could somehow, magically, deal with the financial consequences later, that she signed her own name on the dotted line. The trap was now legally and irrevocably set. The day of the spring charity gala was a perfect, Carolina blue afternoon. My team and I descended on the UNC campus like a small, disciplined army. We were not there to do a favor for my daughter. We were there to execute a high-profile, 5-figure contract, and we were there to be flawless. The event was held in a grand, historic ballroom on campus, a space of soaring ceilings and Palladian windows. My team transformed it. We brought in our own linens, our own china, our own crystal. The floral arrangements were breathtaking. The lighting was subtle and dramatic. The room looked like a scene from a fairy tale. Chloe, when she arrived to inspect the setup, was speechless. Her face, which had been a mask of anxiety for weeks, was now alight with a look of pure, unadulterated awe. She had seen my work before, of course, but she had never been a client. She had never seen the full, overwhelming force of my professional competence up close. "Mom," she breathed, her eyes wide. It's perfect." "I'm glad you are pleased, Miss Garrett," I replied, my voice a cool, professional calm. "My team and I strive for excellence." The event itself was a triumph. The 500 guests, a mixture of wealthy alumni, university trustees, and the elite of the student body, were dazzled. The food was a symphony of flavors, a testament to the Creole and Low-Country roots that had inspired my cooking. The service was invisible, impeccable, a silent ballet of my perfectly trained staff. Chloe was the star of the evening. She moved through the crowd, accepting compliments, her face flushed with a victory she had not earned. She was the brilliant, successful social chair who had pulled off the impossible, the event of the year. Her father and Isabel were there, of course. They held court at a prime table, their expressions a mixture of smug pride and a kind of proprietary ownership of the event's success. They saw this not as my triumph, but as theirs. They were the sophisticated, wealthy family who had, through their connections and their taste, made all of this possible. They had no idea that they were merely guests at a party for which their own daughter was about to receive a devastatingly large bill. I remained in the background, a quiet, watchful presence. I was in my professional uniform, a simple, elegant black chef's coat. I directed my staff. I oversaw the kitchen. I was the general, commanding my troops from the rear. I watched my daughter bask in the glow of her temporary, borrowed success, and I felt not a flicker of maternal pride. I felt only the quiet, patient satisfaction of a businesswoman who is about to close a very, very profitable deal. The performance was flawless, and the final, and most important, part of the service was yet to be delivered. The gala was winding down. The band was playing its last, slow song. The guests, full of my food and my wine, were beginning to depart, their voices a happy, satisfied murmur. It had been, by all accounts, a perfect evening. Chloe was standing near the grand entrance of the ballroom, accepting the final, gushing compliments from her sorority sisters and their wealthy parents. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated triumph. She had done it. She had saved her reputation. She was a star. Her father and Isabel were standing beside her, their own faces beaming with a kind of reflected glory. They were the proud, supportive parents of this brilliant, successful young woman. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment of maximum public triumph. I emerged from the backstage area, where I had been overseeing the breakdown of the kitchen. I was holding a single, crisp, leather-bound portfolio. I walked, with a calm, deliberate purpose, across the ballroom floor towards the small, victorious family group. "Chloe," I said, my voice quiet but carrying a new, unmistakable note of authority that cut through the happy chatter. She turned to me, her smile still bright, but a flicker of unease in her eyes. The party was over. The caterer was approaching. "Mother," she said, her voice a little too loud. "Thank you so much. The event it was everything I dreamed of. You were amazing. I'm glad you were pleased with our service," I replied, my voice cool and professional. I looked at Isabel and Robert, who were watching me with expressions of benign, condescending approval. "It was a pleasure to work with your daughter." I then opened the leather portfolio. "As per the terms of our contract," I said, my voice clear and ringing in the suddenly quiet space, "I have the final, itemized invoice for you to sign off on." I presented her with the bill. It was a multi-page, meticulously detailed accounting of every single canapé, every bottle of wine, every hour of staff overtime. And at the bottom was the final, 5-figure sum, the remaining 50% of the contract. Chloe stared at the bill, her triumphant smile frozen on her face. The invoice?" she stammered, her voice a confused whisper. "Yes," I said. "The final payment is due upon completion of the event, as per the contract you signed." The color began to drain from her face. But I thought," she began, her eyes darting nervously towards her father and Isabel. "I thought you were helping me." "I am helping you, Chloe," I said, my voice still quiet, still calm. "I am helping you to understand the value of a professional service, the value of the work that I do." I then reached back into the portfolio. "And speaking of the value of things," I continued, "I have one other invoice for you." I pulled out a second, single sheet of paper. It was not a catering bill. It was a simple, clean, and devastatingly clear invoice, printed on my own, personal letterhead. It had a single line item. For 2023 Honda CR-V, title transferred to Ms. Isabel Blackwell at the request of Ms. Chloe Garrett. And next to it, the price, $35,000. I placed this second invoice on top of the first. The total, I believe, I said, doing the mental math, is just over $62,000. I looked from my daughter's pale, horrified face to Isabel's and Robert's, which were masks of stunned, slack-jawed disbelief. You told me that Isabel was the better mom, I said, my voice a final, quiet judgment. And I have accepted that. I am not your mother tonight. I am just your caterer. And your car dealer. Business is business. I placed a pen on top of the stack of papers. I'll need your signature on the catering invoice, I said. And I will expect a check for the full amount within 30 days. I'm sure you're better, Mom, and your father will be more than happy to help you with that. And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving them standing in the beautiful, glittering ballroom, in the wreckage of their own triumph, with a final, and very, very large, bill for their own cruelty. The 2 years that followed were a brutal, and necessary, education for my daughter. The shock of that massive, unexpected bill sent a seismic wave through her life, and through the shallow, transactional world of her father and stepmother. As I had predicted, she was forced to go to them for a bailout. The conversation, as she later recounted it to me, was a masterclass in humiliation. Isabel, who had so gleefully accepted the gift of the car, was suddenly furious at the idea of having to pay for it. Robert, faced with a sudden, 5-figure expenditure that was not for his own pleasure, was cold and judgmental. They gave her the money, but it was not a gift. It was a loan, with a formal parent-child contract and a strict repayment schedule. Their support, when it had an actual price tag attached, was revealed to be a very conditional, and very resentful, thing. The experience was a harsh, cold, and deeply clarifying dose of reality for Chloe. It shattered the glittering, effortless fantasy of Isabel's world. She began to see her stepmother not as a mentor, but as a shallow, manipulative woman. She began to see her father not as a powerful patriarch, but as a weak, selfish man. And she began, for the first time, to see me, her mother, not as a source of shame, but as a source of a quiet, unshakable strength she had never appreciated. She changed. The transformation was not immediate. It was slow, and it was painful. She dropped out of the expensive sorority. She got a real, paying job at a local art gallery. She started to live within her own, modest means. She began to grow up. She started calling me, not to ask for anything, but just to talk. The calls were awkward at first, full of long, unspoken apologies. But over time, the walls began to come down. She started asking me about my business, about my life, with a new, genuine curiosity. The true turning point came a few months ago. She called me on a Saturday morning. "Mom," she said, her voice hesitant. "I know you're probably busy, but we have a big event at the gallery tonight, and our regular catering service just canceled. A pipe burst in their kitchen. I know it's a long shot, but is there any way you could help? I'll be there in an hour," I said. That night, for the first time in years, we worked side by side. She was not a client. She was my daughter. She was smart, she was efficient, and she was, I saw with a surge of profound, maternal pride, a natural leader. She was not ashamed of the work. She was proud of it. She was proud of me. At the end of the long, exhausting night, as we were packing up the last of the equipment, she turned to me, her eyes full of tears. "Mom," she said, her voice a raw, broken whisper. "I am so sorry. For everything. For the car. For the things I said. For being such a stupid, ungrateful, and awful child." "You were a child, Chloe," I said, my own eyes now wet. "You were just a child, trying to find your way." "No," she said, shaking her head. "I was a fool. I had the best mom in the world, a mom who was strong and brilliant, and who built a whole world for me with her own 2 hands. And I was too blind and too stupid to see it." I pulled her into a hug, and she sobbed against my shoulder, a 21-year-old woman crying with the heartbroken, cleansing grief of a child who has finally, truly, come home. I had always loved my daughter. But in that moment, I realized I had my daughter back. The one I had raised, the one I had almost lost. Our relationship was not the same as it was before. It was better. It was stronger. It had been broken, and it had been rebuilt, not on a foundation of easy, unthinking obligation, but on a new, hard-won, and deeply cherished foundation of honesty, forgiveness, and mutual respect. And that was a gift more valuable than any car, more precious than any contract.